for taking my question. President Biden was expected to repair the damage caused by the previous administration to the NATO. The way the withdrawal was carried out added new strength to the alliance. How severe is this damage, and what you would tell your allies?
President Biden has a long and deep history of solidarity and commitment to the NATO alliance. His commitment to Article 5 is rock solid and sacrosanct. We just had a very successful NATO summit where we committed to a new strategic concept and a new way forward on the emerging threats we're going to face. He believes in his personal bonds with the leaders of NATO, and he believes in the institutional bonds between the United States and NATO. And I would just note also that our Secretary of State and our Secretary of Defense went to repeated ministerial meetings at NATO for consultations on this decision, and ultimately secured an agreement of the North Atlantic Council for it to be carried out along the timetable that was laid out. All of the allies signed up to that. What the president also committed to was making sure that every last NATO troop on the ground in Afghanistan, and there were more NATO troops in Afghanistan than American troops when Joe Biden took office, would get out safely and securely without incurring a single casualty, and he executed that. And then finally, he's committed to facilitating the flights of our NATO allies and partners to get their civilians out and to get others out. And he is in the process of doing that. In fact, planes from NATO countries have landed and taken off with their personnel over the course of the past 24 hours.
I think your previous answers are not enough to assure U.S. allies and partners, because first, Korean War broke out as a civil war. If the United States commit only to places that without civil war, how can you ensure allies that the United States will defend them in a crisis that can describe as a civil war? For example, if the People's Republic of China attacks Taiwan, the Chinese can argue that it is a civil war among the Chinese, and how can you just how can you justify the U.S. involvement in Taiwan and South Korea? And I also understand the United States did not want to make a sacrifice, but at the same time, leadership requires a sacrifice. And how can you just claim to be a global leader without making sacrifice?
So I want to start where your question ended, because the United States made an extraordinary sacrifice in Afghanistan. 2,448 Americans lost their lives in Afghanistan. Tens of thousands of Americans were injured in the war in Afghanistan over 20 years, trying to help that country stand up and being able to defend itself. The United States spent more than $1 trillion of its resources in Afghanistan. The amount of sacrifice and solidarity and commitment to Afghanistan, to trying to give it a chance, was immense. And it wasn't just the United States. Many other countries joined us and had their own sacrifice. Excuse me. Let me just finish answering the question. And so the idea that there was a lack of sacrifice on the part of the American people is belied by the rows of headstones over at Arlington National Cemetery, where people have come home. When it comes to Taiwan, it is a fundamentally different question in a different context. And so from our perspective, what we need to focus on, well, I'm sorry, if I'll take the next question if you won't let me answer. Yeah.